Alright, let's talk about the villain era. Hi, my name is Joy, and welcome to my channel. I decided to combine my love of pop culture and film, TV, literature into one semblance of a platform. I was going to make a series of video essays, if you will, about different aspects or different trends in social media that have been really pervasive in our culture. And one of the things I wanted to start with is the idea of the villain era. So many of the articles I read online point to the most recent season of Euphoria that premiered last year being the start of the villain origin story. A little recap of the show if you haven't seen it. It's basically a streaming sensation on HBO, headlined by Zendaya and a cast of rising young actors such as Sydney Sweeney, Hunter Schafer, Jacob Elordi, Alexa Demie. One of the main storylines of the first season was this toxic relationship between the characters of Maddie and Nate. I mean, it included a scene of physical assault where it didn't directly cause their breakup at the end of the first season. I mean, it probably played a large part, but keep in mind, this was a very abusive relationship. So in the second season, a previously fan favorite character, Cassie Howard, played by Sydney Sweeney, ends up hooking up with Nate, and Cassie's Maddie's best friend. But Cassie justifies her actions as being, well, Maddie and Nate were broken up. It's not like she betrayed Maddie like that, even though she did. But she and many other characters get exposed in her younger sister Lexi's school play at the end of the second season. And Cassie's infamous line, well, if that makes me the villain, then so be it. I'll play the fucking villain, has given life to a whole era of unhingedness on TikTok and Twitter and social media. But what does it actually mean? Articles like Refinery29 or Bustle say that the villain era is not actually about being wicked or evil or embodying the spirit of an actual villain. It's more of a self-help, self-care perspective. It's about putting yourself first and asserting your boundaries, learning when to say no when you're burnt out and exhausted instead of running yourself down to the wire. I feel like these are more saccharine definitions of what Gen Z and social media has taken the villain era to actually mean. But what's interesting is that an article in Vogue India actually says that this label is problematic. And there is a very valid point there. When women are assertive and don't conform to societal expectations, they receive backlash, whereas men are allowed to say no. Men are allowed to be ruthless and a bit more brazen and whatever, and they're praised for it. But I think it's more of a universal coping mechanism for when something bad happens to you. You have the right to feel unhinged and to go unhinged, and you're not alone. You know that other people have embraced their villain eras, so you can too. You want to drink yourself into a coma because he did you dirty? Do what you gotta do. Or I am not advocating you drink yourself into a stupor. Please drink. Please drunk text, snap, tweet, Instagram responsibly, and know that I support you, but I want the best for you. So in breaking down the idea of what the villain era is, I want to move away from the more self-help, self-care connotation of it and focus on what I think it really means is being a gremlin and being unhinged. Well, who does the villain era apply to? Let me get nerdy with you here for a second. I work in publishing, I was an English minor, I love to read. I'm going to tell you a bit about literary devices. A protagonist, you, is the main character. You give off main character energy. Now, an antagonist is not necessarily someone that's evil. It's not necessarily the bad guy. An antagonist can be a person, it can be a situation, it can be an object, if you will, or whatever. It's just something that provides conflict. It puts an obstacle in your goals. So look at this recently released popular YA franchise. It's called The School for Good and Evil. It was originally a hexology, which is a fancy word for 6 books in a series. It's this super fun camp reversal on fairy tales and the chosen ones. It follows these two best friends who are called readers because they're not from the Enchanted Land. They're from an ordinary hometown called Gavaldon. One of the characters, Sophie, she's blonde, she's pretty, she believes that she's meant for this really special destiny because she's read fairy tales and her mom told her she was special. Meanwhile, her best friend Agatha has been branded a witch by the rest of the town. Her mom's the town healer and uses like herbs and stuff like that. So she's also not conventionally beautiful. In the movie, Sophia Wiley is a goddess, so I won't really touch that part in this video. But one night, the two are whisked away to, as you can imagine, the school for good and the school for evil. And then this really invigorating take, Sophie is actually the one who's brought to the school of evil, while Agatha is the one who's brought to the school of good. And this most certainly sends Sophie on her villain era. All her life, she has wanted to be the princess, and she's basically watching watching her dreams be ripped away in front of her by someone who doesn't want it as much or someone who didn't work as hard enough for it. But something also that's interesting about the movie that it teaches you is that no one is really truly good and no one is really truly bad. Again, look at my example of protagonist and antagonist. Depending on who you see as the protagonist, the other one isn't inherently evil. The other one is just being put in the way of the other one's goals. I mean, so who does the villain era apply to? It could apply to you, it could apply to me, it could apply to Janine from Abbott Elementary. If you haven't seen Abbott Elementary, you need to go watch it right now. It's this fun mockumentary sitcom style about a group of teachers who work at an underfunded public school in Philadelphia. The main character is played by Quinta Brunson. Brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. Janine is this overwhelmingly positive, mildly annoying, endearing character who believes and sees the best in everyone. She always wants to make a situation better. She always wants to fix things. Now, Tyler James Williams plays the most stoic, hilarious character called Gregory, and they started to plant seeds in the first season about this chemistry and potential romance storyline between Janine and Gregory. In the mid-season finale, the two of them are at a club. They're grinding on each other. Things are getting a little spicy. They go outside. It's winter, by the way. And he gets a call from his situationship. He leaves Janine outside of the club in the cold. By the time this video uploads, the show will already have come back from the winter break, so we'll already know a little bit more. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see if Janine has a villain era and what that would look like. Does it look like her taking revenge by flirting with another man at the school in front of him? I mean, maybe another woman? Does it look like her taking the high road and pretending that night never happened, or that it didn't matter to her? With such a wholesome character, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how far you can take them to their breaking point. I mean, it's a sitcom, it's not Euphoria, but there's definitely going to be comedy involved. Yes, these are all fictional characters, and it's much easier for them to get away with the consequences of their actions, but they're just like you and me at the end of the day. They've been wronged. They want their due justice. And what does their due justice look like? But before we really get into that, let's talk about the rise in the popularity of the villain. When did this era actually start? Now, in recent times, people have been switching up on me. I thought when our generation watched High School Musical, we were all in agreement that we were Team Gabriella and Team Troy. We were not Team Sharpay, but there is a valid argument here about why Sharpay might have actually been the victim of this trilogy. Let's take a look at the first movie. Sharpay has trained for musical theater all of her life. She's been in every school production. She properly auditioned for this winter school musical. All of a sudden, this new girl has swooped in, somehow gotten an audition for the school musical that she didn't even really audition for, and she's got the attention of Sharpay's high school crush. Sure, I understand. I would be mad too, and I would be mad if in the second movie I pulled strings to get Troy a job at my family's country club, and all of a sudden Gabriella's there. The rest of the Wildcats are there. And then all you want to do is get him a college scholarship. But everybody else is complaining. Gabriella's getting him in trouble. And yet, he still chooses her over you. I get it. There are very valid arguments here. I just don't agree with them. Let's also talk about a character like Blair Walder from Gossip Girl. We love her for her iconic, snarky one-liners and her amazing fashion sense. It made her a fan favorite of the show, even over Serena van der Woodsen, her best friend. However, if you peel away those layers, you realize that Blair is just a ruthless rich girl with a petty vendetta because she feels an inferiority complex to her best friend. I'm not shunning Blair, nor am I shunning Sharpay, because in the end, these are two women who know what they want and have the means and motive to get what they want. It's kind of like that article in Vogue India was saying that we typically tend to demonize or vilify women who portray typically masculine traits like being assertive, being ruthless. But why do we idolize these characters and their actions? One of the common themes between Sophie, Sharpay, and Blair is that they feel that they have been wronged and they deserve their due justice. Another common theme between these three characters is how they go about getting what they want, often through sabotage and deceit. These are typically considered to be immoral or not good. So why do we idolize characters like this? Another thing to look at between the three of them, Sophie, Sharpay, and I really wish I could lump Serena in here, it would be poetic justice, but whatever, and Blair, is that they're all conventionally attractive. In The School for Good and Evil, when Sophie accepts that she is to be the villain, she sort of subverts the trope on its head. She doesn't have to be ugly just because she's a villain. But in the movie, she does undergo an evil transformation when she does turn into an ugly witch, if you will. And she sheds that skin, becoming beautiful once again. The villain's conventional attractiveness is definitely purposeful. We're more inclined to thirst over them and less inclined to see their actions as immoral. less inclined. Not completely blindsided, but less inclined. Because if you look like a character like Voldemort, not Tom Riddle, Voldemort, and I mean, if you're thirsting after him, to each their own. I'm just saying, I'm not. We do see him as an evil dude. Also because he's trying to kill a kid, yes, but if he were still Tom Riddle and he was still at his big age trying to kill Harry Potter, would we be as disgusted? Look, there are tons of academic articles and videos that go really in depth to the psychology of this. I'm just a young adult who spent way too much time on Stan, Twitter, and Tumblr in my formative years. And I think that we idolize these characters because they represent the ugly sides of us. They represent something we can humanly relate to. We feel like we have been wronged. We want to get revenge. And in these characters, you feel a little bit justified for wanting revenge. You feel justified for feeling unhinged. It's a universal feeling, right? Now, if Sophie had stayed a hag in the School for Good and Evil, I wonder if we still would have seen her actions as bad for what they truly are. But I think her transformation is actually really interesting and insightful when you look at the shift that's happening in our culture. We used to see villains as ugly or bad, but now we're romanticizing them into these beautiful, redeemable characters. Okay, and so in wrapping this up, let's look onwards. What comes after this? What comes after the villain era? Does the villain era end? I think the easiest answer to say here is yes. Eras are not supposed to last forever. Eras end so that a new era can come in. In season 3 of Euphoria, I mean, who the hell knows what's gonna happen? Are we still gonna find the villain era sexy by then? Does this make us more choosy about who we allow to be in the villain era and who we don't? How far we allow them to go, and where do we start to pull them back? There aren't that many Cassie stans left, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I might just not spend too much time on that side of Twitter, but is Cassie Howard not only the starting point, but also the breaking point of the villain era? If the cast of High School Musical really does reunite for a 4th movie, are we going to let Sharpay and her big age bully Gabriella all over again? Are we going to let Gabriella and her big age bully Sharpay all over again? When do we draw the line? When does the villain era actually end? I don't know. To me, I think if we keep making villains and their eras palatable, we're always going to have something to relate to for them. And it's going to be interesting to see the trajectory it takes. How redeemable can a villain be? Okay, so really wrapping up here now. The title of this video is inspired by the book If We Were Villains by Emil Rio. The premise of the book is Oliver Marks has just served 10 years in jail for a murder he may or may not have committed. On the day he's released, he's greeted by the man who put him in prison. Detective Colborn is retiring, but before he does, he wants to know what really happened a decade ago. As one of 7 young actors studying Shakespeare at an elite arts college, Oliver and his friends play the same roles on stage and off. Hero, villain, tyrant, temptress, ingenue, extra. But when the casting changes and the secondary characters usurp the stars, the play spills dangerously over into life, and one of them is found dead. The rest face their greatest acting challenge yet, convincing the police and themselves that they are blameless. Now, these students shared an intense bond, something that could only have accumulated from spending so much time together and literally reciting Shakespeare in everyday conversation. I mean, at the beginning of their education, and when they were freshmen, their class size was huge, and each year it dwindled down, weeding out the less talented students, the less motivated students, until it's just these 7 in their final year. By all means, they had formed some semblance of a family, but they were frequently pitted against each other. In this competitive environment, they were forced to see each other's insecurities and know how to push each other's buttons. In the first couple of acts of the story, you definitely see the villain origin stories for some of these characters. And as I've said, when characters feel like they are wronged, they feel like they should get their due justice too, in whatever means possible. A Shakespearean tragedy is very dramatic. It details the hero's fall from grace rather than their rise to grace as we're normally accustomed to. The actions in the story are actively working against the tragic hero, often culminating in an explosive catastrophe that leaves them without a happy ending. If We Were Villains devotedly follows this structure, with the tragic hero literally suffering a fall from grace. Our lives and consequently mainstream media don't rigidly follow this Shakespearean structure, but the ideas are still kind of the same. If we don't go to school, if we don't go to work from the hours of like 8 to 6 p.m., we either don't further our education or we don't get paid. If we don't further our education or we don't get paid, it's very hard for us to move up in our lives. And yes, I know this is a very classic capitalist way of looking at things, and I'm not condoning it, but these parts of society are actively working against us. We're burnt out to the point of exhaustion, but at the same time, we feel this societal expectation to still exert ourselves for other people. In the grand scheme of things, you can't control what makes you happy, sad, mad, or everything in between, or the things that contribute to your villain era. But I think the alluring part of this is that you can control how you react to it. You can control how unhinged you want to be. I mean, I think that's why we idolize the villain characters. We see them taking charge of their actions and taking charge of their fate. And even though the hero usually, always ends up on top, we relate to the villain because we kind of feel like we're knocked down again and again and again, no matter how hard we try. This generation has gone through an intense amount of historical events that have led to this overwhelming sense of nihilism and cynicism. I don't think we're really looking for the good guys who always end up on top. We're looking for the characters we can relate to and who go about getting what they need, how they need it. We're looking for the characters who are willing to say, well, if that makes me the villain, then so be it. I can play the fucking villain. In summation, long live the villain era. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. Please give me a like and please subscribe. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.